This week. Joining us now from Princeton University, back again today. We appreciate his joining us. Eddie Glaude, a professor of religion and African American Studies and the chair of the Center for African American Studies at Princeton. Professor, thank you for joining us again on another tough day for the country. President Obama called you from Europe and said, I'm here in Europe. What should I do to help? What should I do to lead? What would you ask him to do?
Well, I would ask him to speak to the entire country. To talk about the enduring legacy of hatred and bigotry and how it manifests itself in the lives of not only African Americans, but in the sorts of reactions, violent reactions that we just recently saw in Dallas. What I found so strange about his press conference, Mark, was he wasn't speaking to black people. We know all the stats that he cited. And let me be very clear. He said there are some citizens, Americans, who feel that they're mistreated. We don't feel that we're mistreated. I mean, it's evidentiary. It has an evidentiary basis. We know we're mistreated. And he seemed like he was trying to convince white America to take seriously something. And so I want to say that first. And then the second thing I want to say is that my heart goes out to the families of those police officers who were killed. And I hope that as a nation we can find the grace and dignity to not only extend our sympathies to them, but to begin to think about the way we live, that it's no longer sustainable. That we've created this. Yep. It's our responsibility.
Amen. Amen.
Let me ask you this, Professor Glaude. Let me ask you about.
Sure.
You know, I'm thinking about the road that we got here. You know, if you think about, Ferguson and Eric Garner and Baltimore, the Black Lives Matter movement arose out of that. In some ways, it seems as though, even though there was a big reaction to some of those things, not much has changed. So what will it take to bring change?
You know, in my work, I talk about we need a revolution of value. We need to change our view of government, which means we need to change our demand of government. I think we've lost a robust sense of the public good, that the idea of self-care is this kind of isolated individualism in which we all just pursue our own self-interest, which can lead to a wild, wild west culture. So I think we need to change our view of government, change our view of ourselves. I think we need to change our view of black people, which means we're going to have to change our view of white people. That is to say that we're going to have to come to terms with the reality that because one's white, it doesn't accord you any kind of specific privilege. And then lastly, we're going to have to change what ultimately matters. And we're going to do all of this, I think, by the activism in the streets, John. I think that has to continue. We have to make each other uncomfortable so that we can imagine together what a more decent society might look like, what it might be. I think it's going to take place at the polls. We have this amazing, you guys have been talking about it in such wonderful and brilliant ways. We have this amazingly complicated election season, where both choices make you want to throw your hands up. And I think folk are going to show at the ballot box in a variety of ways that they're dissatisfied. And I think we're going to see more struggles in the courtroom and in the workplace. I mean, we're standing on the precipice. And I think all Americans, all of us, need to double down and do the work requisite to imagine a new way of being in the world. So I think a revolution of value, and that's an echo of Dr. King's words in 1968, where do we go from here, where he called for a revolution of values. We need to fundamentally upend a way of life that isn't sustainable. It's no longer sustainable. And let me say this, thin imaginations will seal our fate. We have to be bold in how we think about the future.
You said this morning that the country was a country on edge and that we were a powder keg.
Yeah.
I'm curious of what you think the stakes are here, that if change doesn't come in a relatively expeditious way, what could happen? Be a sociologist for me here a little bit.
Oh my goodness, a sociologist? No.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to. I didn't want to be demeaning. Let's be a future. You can be a futurologist. How about that?
I have to go up to my wife, and she's a sociologist.
Okay, well.
I think the stakes are high. Look, it's no longer the current levels of economic inequality aren't sustainable. The idea of locking black and brown people up at the rates that we do, and allowing police to kill them in these ways isn't sustainable. The fact that we have failed public education isn't sustainable. We can't bomb people around the world into oblivion. That isn't sustainable. In other words, that the very fabric of our society is at stake in this moment, not in the near future. And I know Time magazine, which I write for all the time, has said that Americans are optimistic about our future. But I think if we drill down in that data, we see that we know that there's some choices in front of us, and that we have to make those choices today, all of us. And so the stakes are high. I think, that we actually have in our hands the responsibility of saving the prospects of achieving our country. And that's going to require some hard work. No easy answers. And we can't fall back on the myth of American progress. We're going to have to look as I said yesterday, we're going to have to look the ugliness of who we are squarely in the face if we're going to do this work.
Professor Glaude, we have less than a minute. Just give me a few thoughts of what you think parents should tell their young children, teenage children, 20-something children this weekend about what they should think about what's happening in America.
I just wrote a piece with my son that was just posted on time.com. We exchanged letters about this situation because I was so overwhelmed and worried about him. And the thing that I can only say is that, we have to understand that it's in our hands. Nobody's going to come save us. We have to do this work. And our children and our children's children will have to muster up the courage to step outside of their narrow silos and to see human beings right in front of them as the creations of God, of the Creator Himself, and are worthy of dignity and standing. We have to do this on our own. We have to step outside of the ugly inheritance that frames us and binds us. And hopefully, prayerfully, we can achieve our country.